Welcome into the Paul Kuharsky podcast. I'm Paul Kuharsky at paulkuharsky.com, brought to you by Zen Sports, part of the 440 Sports Network. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. A little bit to talk about after an open OTA this week, where some interesting things were said by a couple players, and will be much more next week. 3 open sessions as minicamp amps up, then 1 the following week, and then the dead, dark, stark reality of the offseason, as there's about 5 or 6 weeks between the end of the minicamp and the start of training camp. Greetings, Adam, Dwayne, Trey, Kane, good to see you. Let's retweet, re-X, spread the word. Let people know what we're doing here, and we'll have a good conversation. I want to start off with some of the stuff that came out of the OTA earlier this week, the open OTA session, which was more about things that were said than things that were seen. Some of which have been talked about elsewhere, but that I haven't necessarily chimed in on yet. So 2 were things that were said by guys that referred back to the previous regime. And I think things that, you would expect guys to start to talk about now, settling into Brian Callahan's operation, and with some space between the Mike Vrabel operation, some time away from the Mike Vrabel operation. Chigakonkwo said, it's more relaxed. We're not as stressed. We're more free on the field. You don't have to minimize yourself. It's a new culture, and it's us having ownership. I don't think anybody is surprised that that would be the feeling of the players under Callahan as opposed to under Vrabel, that Callahan would have a more allowance for kind of that personal freedom, and that it would be a less stressful environment. And that sounds good. Certainly players enjoy it more at this stage. But, they said iron sharpens iron a lot during the Vrabel regime. And, you want a certain degree of stress. Now, I'm not saying you need stress in May in order to have a chance of being a good football team in September by any means. But, it's nice to hear Chig talking about a certain level of stress-free living. But we don't know for sure that that's a great thing in a broad sense for the team. I don't think culture, Eric is saying culture appears much improved. I don't think culture was something that was cited as a bad thing under Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel had a good football culture. And so we'll see, ultimately. So you like what you hear from Chig now. You like the players to feel comfortable and good in May, and for it to be stress-free. And this certainly seems like it will be a less stressed environment for players. Is a less stressed environment for players ultimately a better thing for players? You could find arguments on both sides of that. Sometimes you want your players stressed. I'm not arguing for that. And I would argue for the other side of that at this stage. But I think it's another thing you have to wait and see about. I don't think automatically say, oh, well, thank God the players aren't stressed. That's a much better thing. Arden Key, I thought his was more pointed and, clearly what he said about how things are going now is better than what he said about how things were going previously. We don't leave the field until stuff is fixed. I said, did you used to leave the field before stuff was fixed? He said, hell yeah, we did before. If we messed up, we didn't fix it. Now, that's a big indictment, obviously, of Shane Bowen and Mike Vrabel and what they did with the defense previously in terms of not fixing things before they left the practice field. Now, take into account, if you're having a bad week, you may not have time to be on the field until every single thing is fixed. But Arden Key clearly on board with Denard Wilson and didn't like some things about the previous regime. Now, this is a player who's hopped around to a lot of teams. So you got to take that into account. But clearly felt like Bowen and Vrabel let the Titans get away with some stuff that wasn't cleaned up to the degree that Arden Key thought it needed to be cleaned up. Now, Arden Key also said, he thought he didn't let any runs get outside him last year. And that's not the reason that the Titans are talking about him as a situational pass rusher. Though Callahan said he's a 3-down guy now. He's got a lot of opportunity to be a 3-down player for us. We need him to be a 3-down player, but can't really tell anything about those situations at this stage until the pads are on and we see, the physical play that we need on the edge with those things. So there is Chig Okonkwo and Arden Key with some reflections about some things, new regime versus old regime. The other thing I wanted to talk about before we get into questions, and feel free to continue to stack those up here on the side in the Paul Kuharsky podcast, Calvin Ridley with a huge statement about Treylon Burks. He's going to be a stud. He's like Julio, A.J. Brown, T.O., a dude that big, that fast, he's a stud, man. You don't got to worry about him. And this is a week after DeAndre Hopkins said that Burks is one of the most athletic people I've ever played with. Now, count me amongst those that think that there's been kind of a, I don't want to say edict, but that Callahan or Tyke Tolbert or Nick Holtz, most likely Callahan, said, hey, let's talk positive about Treylon. Let's get Treylon feeling confident because we're saying good things about Treylon. I think talking about Treylon like he's got Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, and Terrell Owens qualities is over the top. And it smacks of kind of confidence infusion desperation. The guy has played 22 games. He's maxed out at 33 catches and 444 yards. He's got 1 touchdown. Now maybe he goes on to great things. It won't change what he's done through his first 2 years. There's not going to be room for him to, I don't know if he's Julio or A.J. Brown or T.O., who's sitting to give him the opportunity to post those kind of numbers out of Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins and Tyler Boyd. It would probably take an injury for him to have the opportunity to do anything like those guys. It seems like a intentional hype train. And then Burks, personality wise, kind of just mumbles and soft answers to all of that stuff. Yeah, it gives him confidence. He wants to avoid injuries, and he can't really offer even a solid example of something that he's trying to get better at this offseason. Look, more power to Burks. It would be tremendous for the Titans if he was a terrific 4th wide receiver and they could roll through 4 guys this season and had 4 great weapons. But they didn't go out and get Boyd and they didn't go out and get Ridley because they think that that Burks is Julio Jones or A.J. Brown or Terrell Owens. And so, A lot of talk, and there's a lot of time for Treylon Burks to show us what he can be. He needs a healthy training camp, a healthy finish to these OTAs, a healthy training camp, and but even then, got to show it to us in games. Got to earn himself some opportunities in games, and then produce in games. And it's going to be a rather slow process for him to get those chances and make the most of those chances. And he's not going to have a ton of chances early on if the three guys in front of him are healthy. So we'll see. But those comments from Ridley and Hopkins really over the top. Trey Wynn says the Burks situation feels eerily similar to Corey Davis. He could have a solid year, but it's too little too late. Well, the thing about Corey Davis is they didn't have great alternatives to Davis, and Davis's last year was a contract year. We're not there yet with Burks, but they've got better alternatives to Burks, though he's not in a contract year. He did win the, Steve points out, he won the 5-yard dash. They have a drill now where they're, trying to beat each other off the snap and the first 5 yards. And he did look good in that last week when we were taking video of that and watching that. Robert says the talk of trading Burks is insane. Why would they do it? Because if they trade him for a 6th rounder at best and he explodes, they'll feel really stupid. I just don't see anybody lining up to trade for Burks. Interloper says, all Ridley said is that Burks is athletic, which is true. Better training and starting younger has led to way more athletic wide receivers coming into the league since Ridley and Hopkins played college football. Yeah. Well, he said he's athletic, and he compared him to athletes like Terrell Owens and Julio Jones and A.J. Brown, who are not just athletic, they're productive. And he hasn't shown any signs of being productive in a way that those guys have been productive. So he did say a little bit more than they're being athletic. All right, so I'm going to scroll back here more towards the beginning and see what you guys had, and we'll go from there. Dad to the Bone, it's his first time catching the show live, so I'm happy to see that. Bart's asking about $20 million in cap space and if that's accurate. I mean, if that's what Over the Cap has, then it's accurate. But there's nobody to spend $20 million on. LD, can you please explain why it's a bad thing for people around this team to be positive? Certain media members think it's toxic. I don't think it's toxic for people around the team to be positive. I think it's a little dangerous to be over positive. I mean, this team was 6-11 last year. It had a lot of holes. There's still questions here. Offensive line needs to show how much better it is. There's still questions at right guard and right tackle. The team that wins free agency every year rarely is the team that shines in the regular season. The Titans are big free agent winners. Why that's going to work for them in a way that it hasn't worked for other teams historically is a fair question. The depth is poor. They still haven't signed a starting caliber safety to go with Amani Hooker. Inside linebackers, a fair question. They don't have edge rushers in numbers. Those are all fair questions. So if you need cheerleading commentary that doesn't still see those questions, you can go to Titans.com and get plenty of that. And you can find plenty of it on plenty of radio shows in town. I don't think it's toxic to be positive. I've been positive. I'm talking from my perspective, which many people would say is the most negative in the market. Um, and I know others are, maybe similar, but I don't know. You got a first-time play caller on offense, a first-time play caller on defense. You've got three teams in the division who are also improved. The defending champions who look very good. I think you pencil this team into the playoffs at your own risk. Jackson Dubois says, it does sound good, the culture stuff, but he does recall my comment at the end of last year was impressive to see guys still carrying on a shit team at the end of a shit season. So that's a point to the good culture the Titans still had last year at the end of the season. I don't think locker room culture was a big problem for this team at the end. Look, I think it's hard to find people who don't agree that talent was the biggest problem on this roster last year. Now, did Vrabel do some things that helped get him fired beyond the talent in terms of his interpersonal dealings inside the building? Certainly. I mean, that's in evidence. But the number one thing that sunk this team over the last 2 years was lack of talent. Adam asks about Mike Herndon, thinking that Josh Wiley could surpass Chig. So Herndon wrote that he could see Wiley being more the first and second down tight end and Chig being more the third down tight end because Wiley brings some size that the Titans would lack in their three wide base set. And I think he might be onto something there. That's definitely something to keep an eye on. What's my overall perspective on Rand as a GM at this point? Looking better, but we have to see what all these guys do on the field at this point. It's just we're very much in a wait and see position. A lot of it depends on how Will Levis plays and what he turns out to be, because that's the guy they decided was going to be their quarterback going forward. So we need to see what he does from there. And, but things look good right now. Now on paper. So on paper, he's done a pretty good job through 2 off-season acquisition periods. We've got to see what it looks like on the field. We've got to see what Callahan and his staff look like. We've got to see what these scouting moves look like. Is it more than is Highsmith more than bringing in a friend? What are the tangible effects of that and things like that? Trey, one of the few remaining fans of my old podcast called Elsewhere. Could we bring back the PK podcast talking about life? I forget the title, but it was on the Zone, and I genuinely enjoyed those. I genuinely enjoyed doing them. It was called Elsewhere, and I had a lot of fun with them. But given the demands for Titans-related content, I don't know that there's huge demand for that. And so, and it was fun, but it's also challenging to come up with the content for those. So maybe you put a little poll out there, Trey. Tall Texan says the entire coaching staff from top to bottom was garbage. Look at what the players are saying and the product on the field. The Titans should win 3 to 4 more games this year based on an actual coaching staff. Well, so the entire coaching staff was top to bottom was garbage. Well, the cornerback coach is the same. So based on Tall Texan 927 Abel, cornerbacks would be shit. See, here's a direct example. So last year, the cornerback coach, Chris Harris, had Christian Fulton probably as his number one guy, right? Who was hurt and inconsistent, played poorly in stretches. Sean Murphy-Bunting as his number two, and Roger McCreary as his slot. Now this year, Chris Harris gets L'Jarius Sneed and Awuzie as his outside corners, with Brownlee as his third outside corner, and with Roger McCreary inside. Now, I wonder if you're going to think that Chris Harris is shit this year as compared to last year. It's a perfect example. He's significantly in significantly better position to be a significantly better cornerback coach with those additions, with Awuzie and Sneed and Brownlee instead of Fulton and Bunting and Avery as his top three outside cornerbacks. So I bet that you're going to think that Chris Harris is a substantially better coach this year. And if you look at, I'm not going to have it off the top of my head, Jason Alton is now the tight end coach. So is he allowed to be good on Callahan's staff when he was running back coach on Mike Vrabel's staff? Brian Callahan kept a decent handful of Mike Vrabel guys, most of them low ranking, but Brian Callahan kept more guys from Mike Vrabel's staff than Mike Vrabel kept from Mike Mularkey's staff. So if the entire staff from Mike Vrabel was garbage, well, Brian Callahan kept some garbage then. So you're tying yourself in a knot here. If you love the new staff and you hated the old staff, and the new staff includes a good handful of guys from the old staff, you've just tied yourself into a pretzel there. So I'd like Tal Texan to respond to that. Yeah, Bart is circling back to Arden Key. We need him to be a three-down player because they have nobody else, which is absolutely true. Interloper Bob says Nick Vannett might surprise people. He was really underused in Denver. If Nick Vannett was a big surprise, somebody would have signed him to be more than a third on a 3 wide receiver offense, I think. Ed Henry says, with regard to Key's comments, could it be that the players that didn't get it right in practice didn't play on those plays or packages? That sounds good, Ed, but generally you're practicing the plays with your front liners in practice. If you don't get it right with your front liners in practice, but you hear oftentimes like, a certain play that breaks in a game and guys will say, yeah, we didn't connect on that in practice all week. There's a time constraint element sometimes to getting something to work. So you may have, I'll use a trick play as an example because those are the kind that stand out, but they may be working on something all week. Well, you run it, 4 times over the course of the week. Does it click perfectly? It might not click perfectly, but it doesn't mean that you don't do it because it didn't work when your pieces are in the right places and the defensive look that you get is just what you want. So you still run it and it may work. Now, does that count in Key's qualification of people making mistakes? I don't know. Is he talking about it not being executed perfectly? I don't know. Adam says, in his opinion, Vrabel's DC and OC hires in recent seasons did him in. Vrabel's an excellent leader of men. He needed better coaches in those positions. Hence, LaFleur and Arthur equal success. Well, LaFleur was not a very good offensive coordinator in one season here. He only had 2 defensive coordinators in Pease and Bowen. So it wasn't like there was a ton of turnover at defensive coordinator. And I think the defense generally, when it had good personnel, was generally good or good enough at important things like red zone defense, scoring defense, things like that. I'm going to go retweet here. Somebody saying he doesn't know what's worse, Ridley saying all of that or Hopkins speaking in German. Hopkins said one word in German. That's not exactly speaking in German. Scrolling. Nick says 5-yard dash is not meaningful. When the meaning of the drill is getting off the line of scrimmage fast, and they want to see who's getting off the line of scrimmage fastest in the context of that small drill, it's meaningful. Do I think with all the moves made in the offseason, it shortens the grace period for overall expectations with team Callahan Levis? Whose grace period? Fan grace period? Maybe. Amy's grace period? Probably not. Look, I've gone back to this quote way too often, but I think it's pertinent, and it's from Chad Brinker, who told me at the owners' meetings, when I asked him about expectations for this season, he just talked about all the newness. How fast does all the newness gel? All these new players, all these new coaches, new systems and everything. We've seen examples of that stuff gelling quickly and a team taking off, and that's possible. It's also possible it takes a while. And so that's one of the biggest storylines for this team. How long does it take for all of that stuff to gel? And I think it's reasonable. A reasonable possibility that it could take a while for all that stuff to gel. How has Sweat's weight looked so far? If you think that I could tell the difference between 350 and 360 with my eyeballs, you're really giving me a lot of credit. Also, we saw Sweat at the rookie practice. We have not seen him at the 2 OTA practices, because he suffered some minor thing that he's been rehabbing. I suspect he probably is on the field with them today. Is D-Hop asking the team for a new contract? No idea. But if he is, and he could be behind the scenes, it's not in a, I doubt very much it's in a, that they're in some kind of like deadlock. I think that he, maybe asking for an extension, but it's not like it's a doubt that he wasn't at OTA the other day over a contract dispute, or that it'll be an issue heading into the season or anything like that. Farley's been at the back of the line for quarterbacks. Rooney Glover is asking, how does he look? There's 2 other votes for bringing back elsewhere. So I've got 3 potential listeners for my Elsewhere podcast. I would never, Kane, predict a stat line for somebody like Tyler Boyd. Austin wants the Titans on, the decision's been made for Hard Knocks, but he wants the Titans to be on Hard Knocks. Bottom 3 team as far as national attention, but that also means they'll never be on Hard Knocks because it won't bring numbers. Media team needs to do more. Well, what do you think their media team could do to get them on Hard Knocks? First off, I think the Titans are perfectly fine operating in the background. I think having Hard Knocks cameras in your face throughout training camp is a big pain in the ass that they'd rather avoid. It's also tighten up here is correct. Hard Knocks is not allowed to go to a team with a first-year head coach. That's one of the conditions of the whole thing. Jackson wants me to bring back the midday pedal tavern. Well, midday doesn't exist anymore, so it'd be hard to bring back the midday pedal tavern. Can I provide more details on installing an offense? Mostly designing new plays or pulling from other teams, assuming a combo. Well, you start with the playbook. And so you say, here's our first down offense. Well, let's start with play number 1. They go through 10, 12 plays, however many plays in a meeting. And they talk through, this is how this play works. So they start in the positional meeting rooms. Tight ends, this is what we're doing on these 12 plays. Everybody understand it. This is why we're doing it. They're doing the same thing in the wide receiver room. They're doing the same thing in the offensive line room. They're doing the same thing in the running back room. Then they take it bigger into the offensive meeting room. Then they take it out on the practice field and they walk those plays through early in the day. And then they take it into practice and they run those plays. And then afterwards, they look at those plays on film and review how they went. Okay, we got this one ran right. See how this one, on this one, look, the tight end here, was supposed to release and go to the flat, but he waited too long and blah, blah, blah. And they see how the whole play from its inception from the small meeting rooms to the big meeting rooms to the walkthrough to the practice play against a defense, a practice play against the defense came to fruition. They review it. Do we have it? We've got it. Then they'll do that again in training camp with those same plays. Then they go all the way through their first down stuff, first and second down stuff. Then there's third down stuff. Then there's red zone stuff. Then there's goal line stuff. So you're installing the entire playbook. Installing it means bringing the stuff that's in the playbook to life in the meeting rooms and onto the field. Is it going to be a blitz happy defense this year? Depends on how much rush they can get up front. But yeah, I think we'll see more blitzing than we've seen in a long time. Bernard Wilson is in part a Greg Williams disciple. Greg Williams was a blitz from everywhere at any time kind of defensive guy. Kenneth Murray is a blitz kind of inside linebacker who's going to be at his best if he's blitzing, and they need to find a rush from places other than Harold Landry and Key. When he can get there, they're going to miss Danico Autry clearly, and the hope is that Simmons and Sweat can create internal pocket push that will be impactful. But I don't see the 4-man rush possibilities that they've had in recent years. Adam says he agrees with my general thought. This time of year is not the best for player acquisition. That said, it seems he'll add a safety to start at some point. Do I think there could be an inside linebacker? I think they're done at inside linebacker. I think safety, the three good ones out there, and Marcus May, Justin Simmons, Conjure Diggs. I would think the other spot would be edge, particularly Carl Lawson. Looks like an attractive guy. Kind of fell out of favor with the Jets in that I don't know. There's a bad personal relationship there. He had a bad back at the beginning of camp last year. They had really good options to rush the passer, and he never really got back in the rotation. Pushing elsewhere on Twitter. Let's do it. Who's financing that project, Nick? The plays are really built on game week based on the other team's defense, but this is the time for base formations. There are not that many plays built during the week. They pull plays out of their playbook. Well, these plays are particularly good against this team, and maybe we build a couple based on what we've seen. But they're not writing up a playbook of new plays based on the opponent. They're pulling from their playbook the plays that they think are best for a particular opponent. Yeah, Glory, I just said. I mean, I think they add a safety. Ideally, they'd add an edge. I think that's probably it. Then you would add, at the end of training camp, based on your failures and how attractive people are that are cut elsewhere. If you have injuries between now and then, that could change what you add. Ed, I don't think Ed says, besides Key's comments, do I think it's intentional that players are calling out the former regime, or is it just a case of being complimentary to the new staff and changes? Two guys said something. Keys was a little aggressive. I don't think Chiggs was, particularly negative about the old regime. It was more positive about the new regime. I don't think there's some epidemic of people saying bad things about the old regime. So I don't think there's much to it. Which draft pick do I believe will have the biggest impact? Well, the two draft picks that better have the biggest impact are Latham and Sweat. Ed wants to know who's in charge of determining who the media speaks with. Is it the PR department that runs it past Callahan? Yeah, it's awkward right now. And the release came out about how these three practices are going to run next week. We're not liking it. So they're claiming they're asking us who we want. So we're submitting names. But like the first day, a lot of us asked for Burks, and we didn't get Burks until the second day. So that's a week removed. I know Rex Road and I are both very interested in talking to NPF. NPF's probably off limits because he's hurt and he's inside. So there's no sign of NPF. I've asked for Charles both times. No Charles. So it's much more limited than it's been in the past. It's much more limited than it should be, where we typically have been able to approach anybody leaving the field that we want. So they say they're collectively taking requests. I mean, it'll get repetitive fast if they don't start giving us people like Sadiq Charles this week. But also, if six guys are talking at the same time, it's not an efficient way to do it, because if six guys are talking at the same time, or four guys are talking at the same time, then they've got four waves. So if I start at player A, by the time I work to player D, then he's answering the same questions for the fourth time. So it's just not great right now. Why are people so high on the Eagles? Robert wants to know, did they not watch their last 9 games? Some serious issues going on there. Well, they have a talented roster, so I think people are thinking that the Eagles will fix whatever was going on there in their last 9 games. If the season started today, who are my top 5 offensive line, backup center, swing tackle, and backup guard? Well, my offensive line would be Petit Frere, Charles, I think, Cushenberry, and then obviously Latham at right tackle. At left tackle, and obviously number 11 draft pick from last year at right guard, whose face I'm seeing and I'm completely blanking on right now. You know who I'm talking about. Backup center would be Charles or Brunskill, depending on how you wanted to move things around. Swing tackle would be probably Duncan. Backup guard would probably be Radens. Skronsky, I'm blanking out on there for some reason. The special teams question about the new kickoff, it's just too early to tell how it affects the Titans at this stage. What's a reasonable expectation for how much the Titans offensive line could improve this year? Like from 30th in the league to top 15? Sure, they could be 12. I don't see why not. Do I think Skronsky's surgery at the start of last season greatly affected his season? Yes. Do I expect a great step forward there? Yes. Second year, totally familiar with guard, better coaching from Bill Callahan. Look, he lost a decent amount of weight from the appendectomy, then went a week without eating pretty much. Hard to recover from that in season. I don't know Brunskill's money. Somebody's asking me about Brunskill as a cut candidate if Charles were to beat him out. Maybe Radens is a more cost-effective as a backup. Maybe not, since we have plenty of money. I would think, load up there. I know they don't think of Radens as a tackle at this time, but if some of those tackles don't pan out, then you've got a guy there. I would keep the best guys. I would think that Brunskill will be one of the best 8, 9, 10. What's my level of faith that the Titans can get the most out of Kenneth Murray? He could be a swing player for us in terms of how good the defense is. Well, yeah, I mean, he's no swing player in terms of playing. He's playing. I think everybody thinks he's the oddest fit of the guys that they brought in. Not particularly instinctive, athletic, needs to be downhill. I think he's got to rush the passer. You can't count on him very much in space, which makes the Cedric Gray match a little weird, because the first thing you read about Cedric Gray from the good draft analysts is that he's not particularly instinctive. So I'd want next to Murray somebody who's incredibly instinctive. And so that is curious. And that's why inside linebacker is still a ridiculous, a position of concern for sure. Somebody's asking if we've talked to the special teams coach. No, he's not been made available yet. Brunskill's got $500,000 in dead cap. I don't see cutting him as a big option either. I get along with Taylor and Will. Would I ever consider going on the bus? I'd love to be on the bus. They have no interest in me on the bus. They're young and hip, and they consider me as like an old, washed up, like print media guy who's not relevant anymore. Will the Titans score 30 points in a game this year? I would think that they would score 30 points in a game at some point just by accident. But I also think with this offense, they ought to be much more explosive and have that potential. And let me tell you for a second about Zen Sports, my excellent sponsor on this great podcast that you're a part of right now. If you're listening live, and if you're listening later or watching on Twitter or YouTube or Apple or Spotify or iHeart, Zen Sports is the place you should be doing your betting. If you sign up, load up their app, sign up using TN Paul, and then bet as little as $10, and they will give you 1 year of paulkuharsky.com for free, which is a pretty nice deal. But you don't have to bet as little as $10. First bet is a no danger first wager. You can bet up to $1,000. And if you win, you've stocked up your account. If you lose, you get that $1,000 back within 24 hours. It's a pretty sweet deal. That bet needs to be plus 500 or less, which is a pretty sweet deal all around. Zen Sports, check them out. They've been good to me. I hope you'll be good to them. Wherever you're listening or watching, whatever you can do to subscribe, rate, review would be much appreciated. So take care of me there if you will. That would be clutch. Getting back to your questions here. John Gall, I've heard a lot about Ridley standing out. Is that because of the talent we have now, or is that including historical precedent? I mean, he's fast and makes sharp cuts that are very quick. He looks different than the rest of the group out there. He looks different than guys that the Titans have had historically. I think he would be, looks like what you would want him to look like so far. Adam listing reasons that Bussing with the Boys would want me on. It's not for me to choose to be on Bussing with the Boys. Talk to the boys. Jabari says, while he's a Titans fan, there's no way the Commanders and the Vikings should be favored to beat the Titans. I would agree, but let people sleep on it and make a bet with favorable odds and collect your winnings when the time comes. I don't know that it's in your favor to make a bet ahead of time. You get a nice spread, but if Levis is out of that game, then you'd be in trouble when the time comes. So monitor it. But yeah, there's no way the Titans should only be favored in one game. I don't think they're going on a tear. I don't think they're winning 12 games, but I think they're better than most people are predicting them to. Does Callahan spend time with each position group like Vrabel, or is he with the offense and Wilson with the defense? Callahan moves around. He's going to be with the defense more than he's going to be with the offense more than he's going to be with the defense. But these are very short practices right now, hour and 15 minutes. There's a special teams period. There's a stretch period. So it's harder to gauge exactly what he'll be and what he'll be doing until you see what he's doing. Who's my least favorite interview in Titans history? Probably off the top of my head, Darren Bates. Not that I've tried to interview him. He's probably my least favorite Titan in history. I have not seen Rand's interview with Bussin' with the Boys yet. I'm going to a baseball tournament out of town this week. I probably will listen to it on my way there. Force my wife to hear it. There's never going to be a Kuharsky Stillman hour. Little crosstalk when I'm on when I do whatever day he's talks with Robbie and Rex Road. When I'm subbing on that day, you'll get some bonus content. That'll be about it, and that's a good enough amount, don't you think? I think that's a good amount. How does Nick Holtz look? Well, he's about my size, maybe a little bit taller, longer neck, equally bald. There's probably a picture of him on the Titans website. I think that would tell you. I think being asked about Derrick Henry and where he would be Hall of Fame wise, I think there are some people on the committee who thinks he comes up short right now, maybe enough that if he was up for election right now, if his career was over 5 years from now, it would be close. So, if he has 2 good, highly productive seasons in Baltimore, he could get himself over the hurdle. That's about where I stand, I think. I certainly don't see Vince asks, can I envision a tight end like Kelsey or Kittle on this team, or do the Titans see the position as just another blocker? Well, I mean, to get a Kelsey or a Kittle on this team, you'd need to spend huge resources. I think it'd be hard for them to spend those kind of resources on the tight end position. But certainly Wiley and Okonkwo are going to get some catches and have some chances. But this offense isn't focused on throwing the ball to the tight end. It's more wide receiver focused. And that's fine as long as the wide receivers are good. If you're going to have a Kelsey or a Kittle on this offense, then the wide receivers are going to get less. And that's not how they're designed. So positive PK, call for positive PK. I haven't been particularly negative on anything lately is the thing about having positive PK on. So I generally have him on when there's a time where I feel like I need counterbalance. So certainly when I need counterbalance, I will have positive PK on. I've never met Bill Walton. Somebody asking me that. Wish I had. Never overlapped with him any of the times I was in Bristol. Eric asks, am I of the opinion that Levis is the 4th best quarterback in the AFC South? He's a fan, obviously, but putting AR ahead of him seems like a stretch based off him playing 4 games last year. Yeah, I wouldn't put Indy ahead of Tennessee on the quarterback list right now. Based on that, I'm not a big fan of Anthony Richardson coming out. I think he runs around too much for me. So I'm going to need to see him play some effective NFL football before I've got a strong opinion on him right now. But based on experience and having seen him have a couple of good NFL games against Miami, against Atlanta, I'd put Levis ahead of Richardson on my list right now, but that's obviously fluid. And so we need to see what Richardson can do healthy. He's obviously got a pretty good coaching situation as well. So we shall soon see. Oh, so Adam asked favorite interview in Titans history as well as least favorite. Samari Roll, Frank Wycheck, Logan Ryan, 3 of my favorites. All right, questions seem to be winding down. So if you got one that you're waiting to get out there, throw it in. I'll remind you about Zen Sports. Be sure to check out their app. If you're a bettor or considering making some online bets, they're good people. So check them out. And if we don't have anything else pop in here, Jay says Levis has the highest ceiling in the AFC South due to his arm talent. I don't know about that. I mean, CJ Stroud just won Offensive Rookie of the Year. And Trevor Lawrence, hasn't made the most of things so far, but he was judged as a generational prospect when he was the number one pick in the draft just 4 years ago. I wouldn't put Levis's potential above either of those guys yet. Question about where the receivers stand. Best positional group besides defensive back, would it be wide receiver now with the acquisition of Boyd? That's a good question. I mean, I think off the top of my head, I'd probably say wide receiver, but that's kind of like with my fingers crossed because I expect something to go wrong there. Just because they're the Titans and things generally go wrong at wide receiver. And because I'm not thinking of another position that really reaches out and grabs me, right? It's not the defensive line. It's not the edge rushers. It's not inside linebacker. It's not safety. It's not the offensive line with the uncertainty on the right side. It's not quarterback. It's not running back. It's not tight end. So pretty much by default, it's wide receiver, I think. Kane's looking for suggestions in Chicago. I don't know Chicago very well. Yankees are playing the Cubs that weekend. I'm going to that on Saturday afternoon. It better not rain. I have no idea how creative Colt Anderson is and how outside the box the Titans will play on special teams. So I'm being asked here, do I think teams will use someone other than the kicker to kick off due to the new rules? Yeah, I think some will. But I think most teams will figure that the 10 guys can handle making a tackle and that they won't need the 11th guy to make the tackle. If you're using a non-kicker to kick off, you don't have much faith in their 10 who are going to be up in that zone to go make the tackle. Somebody asking if I've seen much out of Snead yet. He's not been on the field so far. He will be, I've been assured, at the mini camp. So I don't know if he'll be on the field at the mini camp. We'll see. if he's on the field, but we know he'll be around, so we should be able to talk to him. So that will be good. Good hour. Enjoyed talking with all of you. Look forward to talking to you again next week after a active week for the Titans, and there'll be a lot to talk about after we see them on the field 3 times. Thank you for coming. Please pass this around on Twitter or point people to it. Be sure to hit the like button, rate, review, and all of that. Subscribe for sure. Don't block the box. Be sure to lock your locks. Take care.